The sun was shining bright that July afternoon in 2014, the kind of day that makes you forget all your worries. The Martinez family was on vacation at a small beach resort in the Philippines. They went there every summer, same place, same little cottage by the water. It was their tradition. Maria Martinez was inside the cottage unpacking their lunch from the cooler. Her husband Roberto was fixing the wobbly leg on one of the beach chairs. Their 8-year-old son Lucas was playing in the sand just a few feet away from their cottage. He was building sandcastles the way kids do. His laughter filled the air every few minutes. "Stay where we can see you," Maria called out to him, not even looking up. She had said the same thing 100 times before on their previous trips. Lucas always listened. He was a good kid. Curious, yes. Adventurous, absolutely. But he never wandered too far. "Okay, Mom," Lucas shouted back. He was focused on his castle, trying to make the towers taller than yesterday's creation. Nobody knows exactly when it happened. Roberto went inside to grab a cold drink. Maria was slicing fruit in the small kitchen. Maybe 5 minutes passed. Maybe 10. Time has a strange way of blurring when everything changes forever. When Maria stepped back outside with a plate of mangoes, she looked toward the spot where Lucas had been playing. The sandcastle was there, half finished. But Lucas wasn't. "Lucas," she called out. Her voice was calm at first. "Kids wander off to find shells or chase crabs. It happens." "Lucas, where are you?" No answer came back. Roberto heard the slight edge in her voice and came outside. "He probably went to look at the boats," he said, pointing down the beach where a few fishing boats were docked. Lucas loved boats. He was always asking the fishermen questions about their nets and catches. They walked down to the dock together. The fishermen hadn't seen any boy. Maria's heart started beating faster. They split up, Roberto going one direction along the beach, Maria going the other. They called his name over and over. Other vacationers joined the search. The resort staff started checking every room, every storage shed, every possible hiding spot. Someone thought to check if Lucas had gone back to their cottage. He hadn't. His favorite blue backpack was still hanging on the hook by the door. An hour passed. Then 2. The local police arrived. They asked questions. What was he wearing? A red tank top and navy shorts. Any distinguishing features? A small birthmark on his left shoulder. Did he know how to swim? Yes, but he wasn't a strong swimmer. The Coast Guard was called. By evening, boats with searchlights were scanning the water. The beach that had been so peaceful that morning was now filled with flashlights, voices calling Lucas's name and the static of police radios. Maria couldn't breathe properly. Every time someone approached her, she thought they were bringing news. Good news, bad news. Any news, but there was nothing. It was as if Lucas had simply vanished into thin air. The first night was the worst. Maria refused to leave the beach. She stood at the water's edge, staring into the darkness, convinced she would hear his voice calling for her. Roberto stayed with her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them shaking despite the warm tropical air. Days turned into weeks. Search and rescue teams came from Manila. Volunteers from nearby villages joined the effort. Divers searched the coastal waters. Helicopters flew over the area. Someone suggested he might have been taken, and police investigated every person who had been at the resort that day. Everyone checked out clean. The prevailing theory began to take shape. The beach had a reputation for dangerous rip currents. Even adults had gotten into trouble there over the years. The local authorities believed Lucas might have gone into the water, perhaps chasing a ball or testing how deep he could go, and been pulled out to sea by a current. It happens sometimes. The ocean could be cruel that way. Maria refused to believe it. He wouldn't just go into the water alone, she insisted. He knew the rules. He always asked permission. But Roberto, as much as it destroyed him, started to accept what the authorities were saying. He was 8 years old, he said quietly one night. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he thought it would be okay for just a minute. After 6 months, the official search was called off. There was nothing more to do. The ocean had taken their son. That was the conclusion. Maria and Roberto held a memorial service on the beach where Lucas had disappeared. Friends and family flew in from California. They released white balloons into the sky. Everyone cried. Going home was impossible to imagine, but they had no choice. Their lives were back in California. Roberto had to return to work. Maria had a job waiting for her. But how do you return to normal life when your child is gone? They kept Lucas's room exactly as he had left it. His bed was made, his stuffed animals lined up on the shelf, his drawings still taped to the walls. Maria couldn't bring herself to pack away his things. Sometimes she would sit in his room for hours just being close to his belongings. Birthdays were agony. Christmas was worse. Every time Maria saw a boy around the age Lucas would have been, her heart stopped. She would stare, hoping against hope. It never was him. It was never going to be him. Roberto dealt with his grief differently. He threw himself into work, staying at the office late, taking on extra projects. Anything to avoid the emptiness at home. The silence where Lucas's laughter used to be. Friends tried to help. Family tried to comfort them. Everyone said the same things. Time heals. He's in a better place. You'll get through this. But none of it helped. How do you get through losing your child? The answer is you don't, you just learn to carry it. Years passed. Maria and Roberto stayed together, though the loss strained everything. Some couples fall apart after tragedy. They held on, maybe out of love, maybe out of shared grief. They rarely talked about Lucas anymore. It hurt too much. His room remained untouched. A shrine to a boy who would be forever 8 years old in their memories. They had no idea that somewhere across the Pacific Ocean their son was still alive. Still breathing. Still surviving. Still thinking about them every single day. Nobody could have imagined what had really happened to Lucas that sunny July afternoon. Nobody could have guessed where he was or what he was enduring. The truth was stranger and more miraculous than anyone could have possibly believed. Lucas remembered the water pulling at his legs. One moment he was standing in the shallow waves, watching a colorful fish swim near his feet. The next moment the ocean had him. It happened so fast. He tried to scream, but water filled his mouth. He tried to swim back to shore, but the current was stronger than anything he had ever felt. His arms thrashed. His lungs burned. The beach got farther and farther away. He could see the cottage getting smaller. He wanted to call for his mom, but he couldn't breathe. Panic took over his small body. Then his hand hit something solid. A piece of wood. Big and rough. Lucas grabbed onto it with everything he had. It was driftwood, probably from an old boat, large enough to keep him afloat. He wrapped his arms and legs around it like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because right then it was keeping him alive. The sun began to set. Lucas clung to the wood, crying, calling for his parents. But there was only the sound of waves and the endless sky above him. He was 8 years old and completely alone in the ocean. He had never been so scared in his entire life. Night came. Lucas had never known darkness like that. No streetlights. No house lights. Just black water and black sky. He kept his eyes closed and thought about his mom's voice, his dad's laugh, his room back home. He sang the lullaby his mother always sang to him, the one in Spanish that his grandmother had taught her. It was the only thing that kept him from losing his mind. When the sun rose again, Lucas was still holding on. Barely. His arms ached. His throat was dry. The salt water had made his skin sting. He had no idea where he was or which way was home. There was just water in every direction. Then he saw it. Land. A tiny piece of land rising from the ocean. It looked like a dream. Lucas kicked his legs, trying to help the current push him closer. It took hours. The sun beat down on him. But slowly he got closer. When his feet finally touched sand, Lucas collapsed. He lay there on the beach, breathing hard, not quite believing he was on solid ground. He had made it. But made it to where? The island was small. Really small. Lucas walked around the entire thing in maybe 20 minutes. There were palm trees, some bushes, rocks, and sand. That was it. No houses, no people. No boats, no way to call for help. At first, Lucas thought someone would come find him. He spent the first few days sitting on the beach, watching the horizon for boats. Any boat. He waved at birds flying overhead as if they could somehow tell someone where he was. But no one came. Hunger became a problem. Lucas had never thought about where food actually came from. It just appeared at mealtimes, prepared by his mom or bought from stores. But here there were no stores, no refrigerator, no mom cooking dinner. He tried eating leaves. They tasted bitter and made his stomach hurt. He found some berries but was too scared to eat them. What if they were poisonous? Then he looked up at the palm trees. Coconuts. He knew coconuts. He had drunk coconut water before on vacation. Getting them down was another story. Lucas tried climbing the tree but kept sliding back down. He threw rocks at the coconuts. Most missed. Finally, one rock hit just right and a coconut fell to the sand. Lucas spent an hour trying to crack it open by smashing it against rocks. When it finally broke, he drank the water inside like it was the best thing he had ever tasted. Because right then, it was. Days became weeks. Lucas learned things he never thought an 8-year-old would need to know. He learned which leaves could hold rainwater. He learned how to crack coconuts more efficiently. He found out that some of the plants on the island had roots you could eat if you washed them in the freshwater spring. He discovered near the center of the island. The spring was his biggest discovery. Fresh water bubbling up from underground. It meant he wouldn't die of thirst. That realization made him cry with relief. Catching fish was harder. Lucas tried using his hands at first, but the fish were too fast. Then he remembered seeing someone on a documentary use a spear. He found a long stick and spent days sharpening one end against rocks. His first attempts at spearing fish were disasters. He would thrust the spear into the water and hit nothing but sand. But eventually, after dozens of tries, he caught one, a small fish barely bigger than his hand. He ate it raw because he didn't know how to make fire. It tasted awful, but it was food. Making fire changed everything. Lucas had watched his dad start campfires before. Something about rubbing sticks together. It took him weeks of trying, his hands covered in blisters before he finally saw a tiny ember. He nearly put it out by blowing too hard on it. But eventually he got a small fire going. Real fire. Warmth. Cooked fish. It felt like a miracle. The first year was the hardest. Lucas cried himself to sleep most nights. He talked to himself just to hear a human voice. He drew pictures of his family in the sand, only to watch the tide wash them away. Some days he wondered if he should just swim out into the ocean and let it take him, but something inside him refused to give up. Maybe it was hope that someone would find him. Maybe it was the memory of his mother's voice telling him to be brave. He built a shelter using palm fronds, copying what he had seen in movies. It wasn't pretty, but it kept the sun off during the day and the rain off at night. He made tools from shells and sharp rocks. A knife for cutting, a hook for fishing, though it rarely worked. He learned to read the weather by watching the clouds and the way the wind moved. Years passed. Lucas grew taller, stronger. His hair grew long and tangled. His skin turned dark brown from the constant sun. The red tank top and navy shorts he had been wearing that day in 2014 eventually fell apart. He made new clothes by weaving palm fronds together. They were rough and uncomfortable, but they were better than nothing. He kept track of time by scratching marks into a tree, one mark for each full moon. He counted 13 moons and knew that meant a year had passed. Then another year. Then another. He stopped counting after a while. What did it matter? Every day was the same. Wake up, find food, drink water, stay alive, sleep, repeat. But he never stopped thinking about his family. He carved their names into trees. Maria, Roberto, Mom, Dad, home. He said their names out loud every morning so he wouldn't forget. He imagined conversations with them, telling them about his day, about the fish he caught, about the storm that nearly destroyed his shelter. Sometimes he wondered if they thought he was dead. They probably did. That thought made him sadder than anything else. He wanted them to know he was alive, that he was trying to survive, that he missed them more than words could say. Lucas became someone different on that island, not the 8-year-old boy who had disappeared from the beach. He became a survivor, someone who knew how to live with nothing, someone who had learned that human beings are stronger than they think they are. But he was still alone, and lonely. So incredibly lonely. Years of hearing no voice but his own, years of seeing no face but his reflection in the spring water. The isolation was its own kind of pain, different from hunger or thirst, but just as real. He never stopped hoping, though. Even after all those years, even when hope seemed foolish. He kept a fire burning every night, thinking maybe someone would see the smoke or the light. He kept watching the horizon. He kept believing that somehow, someday, someone would find him. He had no idea that day was coming. August 2025. 11 years after Lucas disappeared. Dr. Rebecca Chen stood on the deck of the research vessel, squinting at her tablet screen. She was part of a marine biology team from the University of Hawaii, and they had been island hopping for 3 weeks now. Their mission was to study how climate change was affecting small Pacific islands, document the ecosystems, take samples, record data, move on to the next island. This particular island wasn't even on their original list. It was so small it barely showed up on most maps. But they had some extra time and fuel, so Rebecca suggested they check it out anyway. You never knew what you might find. The boat approached slowly. The island looked like all the others they had visited. Palm trees, rocky shore, white sand. Pretty, but nothing special. Definitely uninhabited, or at least that's what they thought. They launched a drone first. Standard procedure. It gave them a bird's-eye view of the terrain before they landed. The drone's camera feed showed the typical island features: trees, vegetation, the beach wrapping around the edges. Then something caught Rebecca's eye. She leaned closer to the screen. "Wait, go back," she told the pilot. Pan left a little. The drone shifted, and there it was again. A structure. Not a natural formation. Something built. A shelter made of palm fronds and branches, constructed with obvious intention and care. "That's weird," said Tom, one of the research assistants. "I thought this island was supposed to be uninhabited." "It is," Rebecca said, "according to every record we have." They flew the drone lower. More details came into view. There were other structures too. What looked like a fishing rack with nets hanging from it. A cleared area that might have been a fire pit. And then, most surprising of all, footprints in the sand. Fresh ones. The team looked at each other. Someone was living here, but who and why? They decided to land and investigate. Safety was a concern, but curiosity won out. 4 of them took the small landing boat to shore. Rebecca, Tom, and 2 others named Jennifer and Paul. They brought their equipment but also stayed alert. They had no idea what they were walking into. The beach was quiet except for the sound of waves. The footprints were definitely human. Adult-sized, or maybe a teenager. They followed the prints up the beach toward the tree line. That's when they saw him, a figure standing at the edge of the jungle. A young man, maybe 19 or 20 years old. He was lean and muscular, his skin deeply tanned, almost bronze. His hair was long, hanging past his shoulders in tangled, sun-bleached strands. He wore clothes that looked homemade, woven from plant fibers. But it was his face that struck Rebecca the most, the expression of absolute shock. He stared at them like he was seeing ghosts, like they weren't real. "Hello," Rebecca called out gently, raising her hand in a peaceful gesture. "We're researchers. We're not here to hurt you." The young man didn't respond. He just stared. Then suddenly he turned and ran into the jungle. "Wait!" Tom shouted, but he was already gone. The team stood there, stunned. What had just happened? Who was that? Why did he run? They spent the next hour exploring the beach area, trying to understand the situation. The shelter was impressive for something built with no modern tools. Inside, they found more evidence of long-term habitation, a collection of shells arranged by size, fish bones, a crude calendar carved into a piece of driftwood with hundreds of marks. "Someone's been living here a long time," Jennifer said quietly. "This isn't a recent thing." Rebecca examined the calendar marks. If each mark represented a day or a week or a moon cycle, they were looking at years. Many years. "We need to find him," Rebecca said. "He might need help. Medical attention. He's clearly been isolated for a very long time." They searched the island, calling out in gentle voices. They tried different languages, though English seemed most likely. They left food and water at the edge of the jungle. But the young man didn't reappear. As the sun began to set, Rebecca made a decision. "We're staying here tonight, on the boat, just offshore. Tomorrow we try again. We can't just leave him." That night they saw a small fire burning on the beach. The young man had returned to his camp. Rebecca took the landing boat back to shore alone, moving slowly and deliberately. She didn't want to scare him again. She stopped about 30 feet from the fire and sat down in the sand. She didn't approach any closer. Just sat there, making herself visible but not threatening. For a long time, nothing happened. The young man stayed in the shadows beyond the firelight. But Rebecca could sense he was there, watching her. "My name is Rebecca," she said into the darkness. "I'm a scientist. I study the ocean and islands. We didn't know anyone lived here. I'm sorry we startled you." Silence. "You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to," she continued. "But I want you to know that we can help you. If you want help. If you want to leave this island, or if you just want supplies or medicine or anything, we can do that." More silence. Then a voice. Rough, like it wasn't used to speaking, like the vocal cords had forgotten how to form words properly. "How many?" the voice asked from the darkness. Rebecca wasn't sure what he meant. How many what? How many years? The question made Rebecca's heart clench. "What year do you think it is?" she asked gently. There was a long pause. 2000. 14, 15. "It's 2025, Rebecca said softly. She heard a sound that might have been a gasp or a sob. Then the young man stepped into the firelight. His face was streaked with tears. He looked lost and found at the same time. 11 years, he whispered. "I've been here. 11 years? Rebecca nodded slowly. "Can you tell me your name? How did you get here?" The young man sat down by the fire, his whole body shaking. It took him several tries to form the words. His voice kept catching like speaking was physically difficult. "Lucas," he finally said. "My name is Lucas Martinez. I'm from California. I got pulled into the ocean. I was 8. I was 8 years old." Rebecca felt her breath catch. This young man had been here since he was a child. Alone, surviving. For over a decade. "Lucas," she said gently, "do you remember your family? Your parents?" His face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "My mom, Maria, my dad, Roberto, are they still alive? Do they think I'm dead?" "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "But we're going to find out. We're going to help you get home." Lucas looked at her like she had just offered him the world, which in a way she had. Over the next few hours, Rebecca sat with him. She didn't push him to talk, but when he did, she listened. He told her about the day he disappeared, about the rip current and the driftwood, about learning to survive. His words came out slowly, sometimes jumbled, sometimes stopping altogether as if he had forgotten how to continue a sentence. She gave him water from a bottle. He stared at it like it was magic. Plastic, a cap that screwed off. Things he hadn't seen in 11 years. When the sun started to rise, Rebecca asked if he would come to the boat, meet the rest of the team. They could give him medical care, food, and start the process of getting him home. Lucas looked back at the island. His island. The place that had been his prison and his salvation for 11 years. Then he looked at Rebecca. "Home," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I can really go home?" "Yes," Rebecca promised. "We're going to take you home." Lucas stood up, his legs unsteady. He took one last look at the shelter he had built, the fire he had kept burning for so many nights, the beach where he had spent so many days watching for rescue. Then he followed Rebecca to the boat. The team surrounded him with kindness, careful not to overwhelm him. They gave him real food, which he ate slowly, savoring every bite. They gave him clean water. They took photos to document his condition. And they started making calls, first to the Coast Guard, then to authorities in the Philippines, then to the U.S. Embassy. They needed to verify his identity. They needed to find his family. They needed to make the impossible real, because Lucas Martinez, the boy who had vanished 11 years ago, the boy everyone thought was dead, was alive. Against all odds, he had survived. And now finally he was going home. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Maria was at work, going through spreadsheets without really seeing them. It had been 11 years since Lucas disappeared, and she had learned to function through the grief, not heal from it. You never really heal from something like that. But you learn to keep moving. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Too many spam calls these days. But something made her pick up. "Is this Maria Martinez?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "Mrs. Martinez, my name is Agent Patricia Wong. I'm with the U.S. Embassy in Manila. I need you to sit down for what I'm about to tell you." Maria's heart stopped. Embassy? Manila? That was where they had been when Lucas disappeared. Her mind immediately went to the worst places. They found remains. They found proof he was dead. After all these years, they were calling to give her closure. "Mrs. Martinez, are you sitting down?" "Just tell me," Maria whispered. "We believe we've found your son. We believe we've found Lucas." The world stopped spinning. Maria couldn't breathe. The words didn't make sense. Found Lucas? That was impossible. Lucas was gone. Lucas was dead. Everyone knew that. "That's not possible," Maria said. "You have the wrong person. My son died 11 years ago." "We thought you should know before it hits the news," Agent Wong continued gently. "A research team found a young man on a remote island in the Pacific. He says his name is Lucas Martinez. He says he's from California. He's been alone on that island since 2014. Maria dropped the phone. Her co-workers rushed over as she collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Not sad sobs. Something else. Something that had no name. Hope and terror and disbelief all mixed together. Someone picked up her phone. Maria could hear them talking to the agent, getting details, asking questions. She couldn't form words. Her boss drove her home. She doesn't remember that drive at all. Roberto was in the garage when she got there. He took one look at her face and knew something had happened. "They found him," Maria gasped. "They found Lucas. He's alive." "Roberto, he's alive." Roberto stood frozen. What are you talking about?" Maria tried to explain through her tears. The island. The research team. A young man who had been there for 11 years. Who remembered their names. Who remembered the lullaby. Roberto shook his head. No, this is a mistake. Some kind of cruel joke or scam. People do that. They prey on families like us. "They're doing DNA tests," Maria said. "They have photos." "Roberto, they're calling us because they believe it's him." The next 48 hours were the longest of their lives, longer even than those first days after Lucas disappeared. At least then they had the buffer of shock. Now they were caught between impossible hope and the fear of having that hope destroyed. The photos came through email. Maria opened the attachment with shaking hands. Roberto stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. The photo showed a young man, 19, maybe 20 years old. Long hair, tanned skin, thin but healthy looking. His eyes were looking directly at the camera, a mixture of fear and wonder on his face. Maria stared at those eyes. She had spent 8 years looking into those eyes, reading bedtime stories, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees. She knew those eyes. "It's him," she whispered. "Roberto, it's our baby." "It's Lucas." Roberto couldn't speak. He just held her while they both cried. The DNA results came back the next day. Positive match. Dental records confirmed it. Lucas Martinez, declared dead in 2015, was alive. He had survived 11 years alone on an uninhabited island. It was the kind of story that seemed too incredible to be real. But it was real. The embassy arranged everything: flights, documentation, medical clearances. Lucas was in a hospital in Honolulu being evaluated. He was physically healthy, all things considered. But psychologically, the doctors warned, he had been through unimaginable trauma. 11 years of isolation during critical developmental years. They needed to prepare themselves. He wasn't the 8-year-old boy they had lost. Maria didn't care. She just wanted to see him, to touch him, to know he was real. The flight from California to Hawaii felt eternal. Maria couldn't sit still. Roberto held her hand the entire time, his own hand trembling. They had been told not to expect too much. Lucas might not recognize them. He might be confused or scared. He had forgotten how to interact with people. When they landed, a hospital representative met them. A kind woman named Dr. Helen Park who specialized in trauma. She explained what they should expect. Lucas could speak, but with difficulty. He was overwhelmed by modern things. Lights, sounds, people. Everything was too much for him. "He asks about you constantly," Dr. Park said gently. "He remembers you. But please understand, his memories are confused. 11 years is a long time, especially for someone who was so young when it happened." They walked through the hospital hallways. Maria felt like she might pass out. Every step brought her closer to a moment she had dreamed about for 11 years. A moment she had stopped believing could ever happen. Dr. Park stopped outside a door. "He's in here. Take your time. Let him set the pace. Don't be hurt if he's hesitant." This is overwhelming for him, too. She opened the door. The room was dimly lit, the blinds partially closed. Sitting on the bed, wearing hospital clothes that looked strange on him, was a young man. He looked up when the door opened. Maria saw her son. Not the 8-year-old she had lost. But she saw him in this young man's face. The shape of his nose. The curve of his jaw. Those eyes. Always those eyes. "Lucas?" she whispered. The young man stared at her. His face went through so many emotions, confusion, recognition, disbelief. Then something broke open inside him. "Mama?" His voice was rough, uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to say the word. Maria crossed the room in 3 steps. She wrapped her arms around him and held on like she would never let go. Lucas tensed at first, his body rigid. Physical contact with another human was foreign to him now. But then he melted into the hug, his arms coming up to hold her back. "Mama," he said again, clearer this time. And then he was crying, deep, gasping sobs that came from somewhere ancient inside him. 11 years of loneliness pouring out. Roberto joined them, his arms around both of them. The 3 of them held each other and cried. Nurses watched from the doorway, many of them wiping their own eyes. No words were adequate for that moment. What do you say when you get your child back from the dead? How do you express 11 years of grief, of hope, of love that never died even when everyone said it should? They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. Eventually they sat down, Maria on one side of Lucas, Roberto on the other. They couldn't stop touching him. His hand, his shoulder, his hair, making sure he was real. Lucas looked at them with wonder. "You're older," he said slowly, his words coming with effort. "I remembered you, but different, younger." "You're older too," Maria said, laughing through her tears. "You're so tall now." "When did you get so tall?" "Did you?" Lucas struggled with the words. "Did you think I was dead?" The question broke Maria's heart. "We hoped," she said. "We never stopped hoping. But yes, everyone told us you were gone. We had a memorial service. We tried to accept it, but I never believed it. Not really. Somewhere inside, I always felt like you were still out there." Lucas nodded slowly, processing this. "I thought about you every day. Every single day. I was scared you forgot about me." "Never," Roberto said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "Not for 1 second. Your room is exactly how you left it. We couldn't change anything. We couldn't let you go." Over the next hours, they talked. Or tried to. Lucas's ability to communicate was limited. He would start sentences and lose track of what he was saying. He used words that didn't quite fit. He made gestures and sounds he had invented on the island to express things he had forgotten the words for. But they understood enough. He told them about the driftwood, about finding the island, about learning to survive. Maria and Roberto listened to their son describe 11 years of solitude, and their hearts broke over and over again. "I'm sorry," Lucas said at one point, "for going in the water. I wasn't supposed to. I broke the rule." Maria grabbed his face in her hands. No, baby, no. This wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. You have nothing to be sorry for. But I made you sad. For so long. You survived," Roberto said. "You stayed alive for 11 years with nothing. Do you understand how incredible that is? How strong you are?" Lucas looked doubtful, like he couldn't quite believe it. On the island, survival had just been existing. Day after day of the same routine. It hadn't felt strong. It had felt lonely. As evening came, the doctors suggested Maria and Roberto should go to their hotel and rest. They would have plenty of time with Lucas tomorrow. Maria didn't want to leave. The thought of letting him out of her sight felt impossible. What if she woke up and this had all been a dream? But Lucas was exhausted. The day had drained him. Too much emotion. Too many people. Too much everything. "You'll come back?" he asked, fear creeping into his voice. "Tomorrow? You'll really come back?" "Every day," Maria promised. "We're not leaving you again. Never again." She kissed his forehead the way she used to when he was small. Lucas closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked exactly like the 8-year-old boy she remembered. That night in their hotel room, Maria and Roberto held each other and cried again. But these were different tears. Not grief anymore. Something that felt almost like joy. Their son was alive. Against every odd, against all logic, Lucas had survived. The road ahead would be hard. They knew that. The doctors had been clear. Lucas had years of trauma to work through. He might never fully adjust to the modern world. There would be setbacks and struggles, but he was alive. He was theirs again. And for now, that was everything. Coming home was harder than anyone expected. The news had broken while Lucas was still in the hospital. Within days, his story was everywhere. News channels, social media, newspapers around the world. The boy who survived 11 years alone on an island. It was the kind of story that captured everyone's imagination. But for Lucas, all that attention was terrifying. Cameras, reporters, strangers wanting to know everything. People he had never met claiming to know what he needed or how he felt. It was too much. Way too much. The doctors kept him in Hawaii for 3 weeks. He needed time to adjust before facing the chaos waiting back home. Speech therapists worked with him daily, helping him rebuild his ability to communicate. Physical therapists made sure his body could handle normal activities after years of survival living, and psychologists tried to help him process what had happened to him. Dr. Park, the trauma specialist, spent hours with Lucas. She explained that what he experienced had a name: extreme isolation. His brain had developed differently because of it. He might always struggle with certain things. Loud noises, crowds, too many choices. Even simple conversations could be exhausting because his brain wasn't used to processing that much social input. "It's not your fault," she told him repeatedly. "Your brain adapted to survive alone. Now it needs to adapt again. That takes time. Be patient with yourself," Lucas tried. But patience was hard when everything felt wrong. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet but also too loud. The temperature was always wrong because he was used to tropical heat. Food tasted strange. Everything was strange. He missed the island sometimes. That thought made him feel guilty. How could he miss the place that had been his prison? But on the island, he knew what to expect. Every day was the same. Here, every moment brought something new and overwhelming. Maria and Roberto stayed with him in Hawaii. They barely left his side. They watched him struggle with things they took for granted. Using a fork, opening a door, understanding what a television was. Lucas would stare at the TV screen with confusion and wonder, not quite believing that tiny people were inside the box. "It's not real," Roberto explained for the 10th time. "They're recordings, like photographs but moving." Lucas nodded, but his expression said he didn't really understand. How could he? He had missed the entire digital revolution. Smartphones, the internet, social media, all of it was foreign to him. Finally, they flew back to California. The airport was a nightmare. Too many people. Too much noise. The airplane terrified Lucas. He didn't understand how something so heavy could fly. During takeoff, he gripped his mother's hand so hard she lost circulation. But he made it through. The house looked exactly as he remembered, but also completely different. It was smaller than he remembered. The colors seemed brighter. Everything felt both familiar and alien at the same time. His room was exactly as he had left it. 11-year-old posters on the walls. Toys he had played with as a child. His bed with the blue comforter. Maria had kept it like a shrine. Lucas stood in the doorway staring. "This was my room," he said quietly. "I remember this room." He walked in slowly, touching things. His old books. His stuffed animals. A drawing he had made in 2nd grade that was still taped to the wall. Tears ran down his face. "Can I stay here?" he asked. "In my old room?" "Of course," Maria said. "This is your home. This is your room. Everything here is yours." The first months were the hardest. Lucas couldn't sleep at night. The darkness reminded him too much of the island. So he slept during the day instead, when light came through the windows. His parents adjusted their schedules around him. Simple tasks were complicated. Going to the grocery store was overwhelming. Too many products, too many choices, too many people. Lucas had a panic attack in the cereal aisle because he couldn't decide what to pick. There were 50 different kinds of cereal. On the island, you ate what you could find. You didn't choose. They started small, short trips outside, quiet parks, empty beaches. Lucas was drawn to water. Being near the ocean calmed him, even though it was also the source of his trauma. He would sit for hours watching the waves, and his parents learned not to disturb him during these times. He needed it. Therapy helped slowly. Lucas saw Dr. Park via video calls twice a week. She helped him understand that recovering from what he experienced wasn't a straight line. Some days would be better. Some days would be worse. That was normal. He started learning again. Basic things at first. How to use a computer. how to text on a phone. Reading came back quickly. His parents had taught him well before the island, and that foundation was still there. But math was harder. History was completely different now. 11 years of world events he knew nothing about. The world wanted to know his story. Book deals, movie offers, interview requests. Roberto and Maria protected him from most of it. They said no to almost everything. Lucas wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be. But there was one thing Lucas wanted to do. 6 months after coming home, he told his parents he wanted to learn about marine biology. The ocean had taken him. The ocean had sustained him. He wanted to understand it. They found a tutor, a patient woman named Dr. Lisa Wong, who specialized in working with students who had experienced trauma. She came to the house 3 times a week. Lucas soaked up the information like he had been thirsty for it. He learned about currents and tides, about fish species and coral reefs, about the ecosystem that had kept him alive. "I want to go to college," he told his parents one night at dinner. "Is that possible? Can someone like me go to college?" "Someone like you?" Roberto asked. "Someone who missed everything. Who's so far behind?" Maria reached across the table and took his hand. "Lucas, you survived alone for 11 years starting when you were 8 years old. You learned things that most people never learn. You're not behind. You're different. And yes, you can absolutely go to college if that's what you want." It took time. Lucas needed to get his high school equivalency first. He studied hard, making up for lost years. Some subjects were easy. Others were incredibly difficult. But he kept trying. 2 years after being rescued, Lucas passed his exam. He enrolled in community college, starting with just one class, Introduction to Marine Biology. He was 21 years old, sitting in a classroom with 18-year-olds. He felt ancient and childish at the same time. The other students didn't know his story at first. He was just the quiet guy who always sat in the back, who never raised his hand but always did the reading, who sometimes stared out the window at the sky like he was seeing it for the first time. Eventually, someone recognized him. His story came out. Lucas braced himself for attention, for questions, for people treating him like he was made of glass. But his classmates surprised him. They were kind but not invasive, curious but respectful. One girl, a biology major named Amy, asked if he wanted to be study partners. Lucas said yes, even though the idea of being that close to someone terrified him. Slowly, very slowly, Lucas built a life. Not the life he would have had if he hadn't been taken by the ocean. A different life. One shaped by isolation and survival, but also by incredible resilience. He still had bad days. Days when he couldn't leave his room. Days when talking to people felt impossible. Days when he wanted to be back on the island where things were simple, and he didn't have to navigate social rules he still didn't fully understand. But he also had good days. Days when he aced a test. Days when he successfully ordered coffee without panicking. Days when he went to the beach with his parents and actually enjoyed it instead of feeling haunted by memories. 3 years after being found, Lucas gave his first public interview. Not because he wanted fame or money, but because he wanted other people to understand something important. "Everyone thinks survival is the hard part," he told the interviewer. "Living alone for 11 years, finding food, staying alive. And that was hard. Really hard. But you know what's harder? Coming back. Learning to live with people again. Learning to be part of the world again. That's the real survival story. And I'm still surviving. Every day, the interview went viral. People around the world responded to his honesty. Other trauma survivors reached out, sharing their own stories of trying to rebuild their lives. Lucas started to understand that his experience, while unique, was also part of something bigger. The human struggle to keep going even when everything feels impossible. He started volunteering at a community center, helping kids who had experienced trauma. He didn't talk much, but he was there. A quiet presence who understood what it meant to feel lost in the world. The kids responded to him. They felt safe around him. On the 11th anniversary of the day he was found, Lucas stood on a beach in California with his parents. They had come here every year since his rescue, a private memorial to everything that had happened. "Do you regret it?" Maria asked quietly. "If you could go back and change it, would you?" Lucas thought about that for a long time. 11 years of his life gone to isolation and survival. Childhood stolen, normal development interrupted. trauma that would affect him forever. I don't know, he said honestly. I lost so much, but I also learned things about myself, about what humans can endure, about what really matters. He looked at his parents. I learned that some people never give up hope, even when they should, even when it would be easier to. Roberto pulled him into a hug. We never stopped believing you were out there somewhere. I know, Lucas said. That's what kept me going, knowing you were waiting for me. They stood together watching the waves, the same ocean that had taken Lucas away and somehow brought him back. It wasn't a happy ending exactly. Lucas still struggled. He probably always would, but he was alive. He was home. He was loved, and he was still learning how to survive in this new world one day at a time. Just like he had learned to survive on that island, because that's what Lucas Martinez did. He survived. No matter what the ocean threw at him, he found a way to keep going. And that, more than anything else, was the real miracle of his story.